Christmas had always been Evelyn Carter's favorite time of year. Not because her family made it special, they rarely did, but because she had spent most of her life trying to make it magical for everyone else. Every December, she was the one stringing lights around the porch of the Carter estate, baking cinnamon cookies from her grandmother's old recipe, wrapping presents with satin ribbons, and making sure every detail looked perfect, and every year her family barely noticed. At 30, too, Evelyn had grown used to being invisible. Her older brother, Daniel, was the golden child, the successful businessman whose every minor achievement was celebrated like national news. Her younger sister, Sophia, was their mother's precious darling, always spoiled and protected no matter how selfishly she behaved. And Evelyn, she was simply the dependable one, the daughter everyone called when they needed something. The daughter who dropped everything to care for their grandmother when she became ill. The daughter who quietly carried the burdens no one else wanted. Still, despite years of being overlooked, Evelyn held onto one tradition with hope: Christmas at the Carter family estate. Their sprawling Victorian house stood at the edge of town, draped every winter in twinkling white lights. It had belonged to Evelyn's grandmother, Margaret Carter, the only person in the family who had ever truly made Evelyn feel seen. Even after Margaret's passing 2 years earlier, Evelyn clung to the memory of those warm Christmases spent by the crackling fireplace, sipping cocoa while her grandmother told stories about family, resilience, and love. That was why, when December arrived and no invitation came, Evelyn felt an uneasy knot settle in her stomach. At first, she assumed it was an oversight. Her mother, Patricia, was known for being scatterbrained when planning events. But as the days passed, the silence became impossible to ignore. No texts about Christmas dinner, no calls discussing gift exchanges, no messages asking her to bake her famous gingerbread cake. Nothing. On December 23rd, Evelyn sat at her small apartment kitchen table, staring at her phone as anxiety gnawed at her chest. She finally sent a message to the family group chat. "Hey, what time should I come by on Christmas Eve? I can bring dessert." The message showed as delivered, then read, no reply. Minutes passed, then an hour. Still nothing. Her stomach sank. Trying to shake off the unease, Evelyn opened social media, hoping for distraction. Instead, her breath caught. Sophia had posted a photo to her story. The entire Carter family stood in the grand foyer of the estate beneath the massive Christmas tree. Evelyn herself had decorated the previous year. Her father smiled broadly, holding a glass of champagne. Daniel stood beside him with his wife. Sophia grinned in front of the fireplace. The caption read, "Early family Christmas celebration at home. Just us, exactly how it should be." Evelyn stared at the words until they blurred. Exactly how it should be. Without her, a sharp ache pierced her chest. Her fingers trembled as she immediately called Sophia. The call connected after 3 rings. "What?" Sophia's voice was clipped and annoyed. Evelyn swallowed hard. "I saw your post. Why didn't anyone tell me Christmas was tonight?" There was a pause, then a cold laugh. "Oh, that? What do you mean, that?" Sophia sighed dramatically. "Look, Mom thought it would be better this way. Better. We wanted something smaller this year. Just immediate family." Evelyn's face went pale. "I am immediate family." Sophia's voice sharpened. "Don't make this into some drama, Evelyn. Everyone's tired of your constant need for attention." The words hit like a slap. "I'm not asking for attention." Evelyn whispered. "Well, whatever, we're busy. Merry Christmas." The line went dead. Evelyn lowered the phone slowly. For a long moment, she just sat there in stunned silence. Then the tears came, hot and relentless, sliding down her cheeks as years of quiet hurt finally surfaced. Had she really meant so little to them? Had all those years of sacrifice of showing up, helping, giving meant absolutely nothing. She was about to turn off her phone when it rang again. The caller ID made her pause. Walter Hayes, the longtime caretaker of the Carter estate. Evelyn quickly answered, wiping her tears. Walter. His voice was low and urgent. Miss Evelyn, I'm sorry to call so late, but I thought you should know what's happening. A chill ran through her. What do you mean? They've invited a real estate agent to the house tonight. They're meeting in your grandmother's study. Evelyn frowned. A real estate agent? Yes. Walter hesitated. They're planning to sell the estate. Her breath caught. What? I overheard your father discussing offers. They're finalizing paperwork after Christmas. That can't be right, Evelyn said weakly. They can't just sell Grandma's house. Walter was silent for a moment. Then he said carefully, Miss Margaret once told me that if this day ever came, I should remind you to check the blue cedar box she gave you after her passing. Evelyn froze. The blue cedar box. It had sat untouched in the back of her closet for 2 years. She remembered her grandmother pressing it into her hands days before she died. One day, when they show you who they truly are, open this. A cold realization spread through Evelyn's body. Walter's voice softened. I think that day has come. After the call ended, Evelyn crossed her apartment in a daze and knelt before the closet. Her hands shook as she pulled out the dust-covered cedar box. Slowly, she lifted the lid. Inside lay a stack of legal documents. And on top, in her grandmother's unmistakable handwriting, was a note. The house belongs to the one person who never abandoned me. Beneath it was the property deed, and printed clearly beside the words sole legal owner was one name. Evelyn Carter. Her tears stopped instantly. The heartbreak in her chest slowly hardened into something else. Resolve. Her family thought they had excluded her. They thought they could erase her. But on Christmas morning, they were going to learn exactly whose house they had tried to sell. Evelyn sat motionless on the floor of her apartment, the property deed trembling in her hands. For several long moments, she simply stared at her name printed in bold legal type across the page. Evelyn Grace Carter, sole legal owner of Carter Estate. The words felt unreal. Her family had spent years treating her as if she barely existed, and yet the one thing they all coveted most, the Carter Estate, had never been theirs to claim. Her grandmother had left it to her. 1,000 memories rushed through Evelyn's mind. She could still see Margaret Carter's frail smile during those final months, her strong hands trembling as illness slowly stole her strength. While the rest of the family had offered excuses, Evelyn had been there every single day. Daniel had claimed work was too demanding. Sophia had complained that hospitals made her uncomfortable. Their parents had appeared only when it was convenient, usually staying just long enough to ease their guilt before disappearing again. But Evelyn had remained. She had cooked her grandmother's meals, read aloud from her favorite novels, brushed her silver hair each evening, and sat beside her through endless sleepless nights. Not because she expected anything in return, because she loved her. The memory of one particular evening surfaced vividly. It had been late autumn, only weeks before Margaret passed. Rain tapped softly against the estate's library windows as Evelyn adjusted the blanket over her grandmother's lap. Margaret had looked unusually serious. Evelyn, she'd said quietly, her sharp blue eyes fixed on her granddaughter's face. Do you know why I've always admired you most? Evelyn had smiled sadly. Grandma, you don't have favorites, Margaret had chuckled. Oh, child, every grandmother has favorites. The wise ones are simply discreet. Evelyn had laughed despite herself. Margaret reached for her hand. The others love what this family can give them. You love without asking for anything back. That makes you different." At the time, Evelyn had dismissed the words as sentimentality. Now she understood. Her grandmother had seen everything. She had known exactly who her family truly was. Shaking off the memory, Evelyn quickly gathered the documents and drove straight to the office of her grandmother's longtime attorney, Harold Whitman. Though it was nearly midnight, Harold answered her urgent call and agreed to meet. The elderly lawyer adjusted his glasses as he reviewed the papers in his office. After several minutes, he looked up with a solemn expression. "It's valid." Evelyn's breath caught. "What?" "The transfer of ownership was completed 6 weeks before your grandmother passed. It was witnessed, notarized, and legally filed." Her pulse quickened. "So the estate is entirely yours." The confirmation hit her like a wave. Years of quiet humiliation suddenly shifted into something powerful. For the first time in her life, Evelyn held all the cards. Harold folded his hands carefully. "Margaret gave me very specific instructions. She believed your family might attempt this someday." Evelyn looked down. She knew they'd try to sell it. Harold nodded grimly. "She told me your family saw the house as money, but to her it was legacy. She trusted only you to protect it." A lump formed in Evelyn's throat. Her grandmother had believed in her when no one else had. As Evelyn left the office, her heartbreak slowly transformed into clarity. She wasn't going to let her family steal what wasn't theirs. Back at the Carter estate, Christmas Eve celebrations were in full swing. Laughter echoed through the grand dining room as Patricia refilled champagne glasses. "To fresh beginnings," she announced brightly. Daniel raised his glass, and to finally cashing in. The family laughed. Sophia leaned back in her chair, scrolling through luxury vacation listings on her phone. "I'm already looking at villas in Italy," she said smugly. "Once the house sells, I'm booking first class." Patricia smiled approvingly. "You deserve it, sweetheart," Daniel smirked, "and it'll be nice not having to split anything with Evelyn." At the mention of her name, Patricia rolled her eyes. She'd only complicate things. Sophia gave a dismissive laugh. She probably spent tonight alone, crying over not being invited. The table erupted in amusement. Their father, Richard, leaned forward. "She's always been too soft. That's why she never got anywhere." None of them noticed Walter, standing silently in the doorway, his expression dark with disgust. The caretaker had watched this family exploit Margaret's kindness for decades. And now they were preparing to rob the one granddaughter who had truly earned the estate. He quietly slipped away, certain he had done the right thing by warning Evelyn. Meanwhile, back in her apartment, Evelyn stood before her bedroom mirror. The woman staring back looked different, stronger, calmer. For years, she had begged for scraps of love from people incapable of giving it. That ended tonight. She carefully placed the deed into a leather folder. Then she called Harold. "I want you there tomorrow morning." His voice was steady. "I'll be there." She ended the call and glanced toward the cedar box on her bed. Inside was another note from her grandmother she hadn't noticed before. Her fingers unfolded the delicate paper. It read, "True family is not defined by blood, Evelyn. It is defined by loyalty. If they betray you, do not mourn what was never real. Stand tall and protect what is yours." Tears filled Evelyn's eyes, but this time they were not tears of pain. They were tears of understanding. For years she had mistaken endurance for love. Tomorrow that illusion would shatter. As snow began falling softly outside her window, Evelyn looked toward the glowing lights of the distant Carter estate. Her family believed Christmas morning would bring wealth and celebration. They had no idea it would bring their reckoning instead. And this time, Evelyn would not arrive as the forgotten daughter. She would arrive as the rightful owner of everything they thought they had already taken. Christmas morning arrived beneath a sky heavy with fresh snow, the Carter estate glittering like a postcard. beneath its blanket of white. Inside, the atmosphere buzzed with anticipation. The grand dining room had been transformed into a celebration of luxury and greed. Crystal glasses sparkled beneath the chandelier. The scent of cinnamon and roasted chestnuts filled the air. Wrapped gifts sat untouched beneath the towering Christmas tree, because, to the Carter family, the true prize waiting that morning was far more valuable. Money. Richard Carter stood at the head of the polished mahogany table, beaming as he adjusted his expensive cufflinks. "This is the best Christmas we've had in years," he declared. Patricia smiled as she poured champagne into delicate flutes. Margaret always clung too tightly to this place. "It's about time we turned sentiment into something useful." Daniel leaned back confidently, already imagining the six-figure deposit landing in his account. "The buyer is offering well above market value. Once this paperwork is signed, we're all set." Sophia grinned, scrolling through photos of designer handbags on her phone. "I've already picked out half my shopping list." Laughter rippled through the room. At precisely 10 o'clock, the doorbell rang. The family exchanged eager looks. "That'll be the realtor," Richard said. Walter opened the front door. Standing outside was the real estate agent, a sharply dressed man carrying a leather briefcase. Beside him stood the prospective buyer, an affluent developer eager to acquire the historic estate. They were escorted into Margaret's old study, where the final paperwork had been prepared. The realtor opened his folder and smiled professionally. "Once all heirs sign, the transaction can proceed immediately." Richard confidently reached for the pen. And then another voice cut through the room. "That won't be necessary." Every head turned. Standing in the doorway was Evelyn. She wore a dark emerald coat, snowflakes melting in her hair, her expression calm and unreadable. For a moment, stunned silence filled the study. Patricia was the first to recover. "What are you doing here?" she snapped. Sophia's face twisted with irritation. "Seriously, you actually came after being told not to," Daniel scoffed. "This is private family business, Evelyn." Evelyn stepped inside slowly, closing the door behind her. "That's exactly why I'm here." Richard's jaw tightened. "You weren't invited." Evelyn met his cold stare without flinching. "No, I wasn't." There was something in her voice, steady, controlled, that made the room uneasy. Patricia crossed her arms. "Well, since you've made your dramatic entrance, you can leave now. We're in the middle of something important." Evelyn's lips curved into the faintest smile. "Yes, selling my house is very important." The room froze. Sophia let out a sharp laugh. "Your house," Daniel smirked. "Have you finally lost your mind?" Without a word, Evelyn placed the leather folder on Margaret's antique desk and opened it. Inside lay the official deed. She slid it across the polished wood toward the realtor. "Please read the ownership record aloud." The realtor adjusted his glasses, confusion crossing his face as he scanned the document. His expression changed instantly. He cleared his throat. "This deed identifies the sole legal owner of Carter Estate as Evelyn Grace Carter." The words landed like thunder. Patricia's champagne glass slipped from her fingers and shattered against the hardwood floor. "What?" she whispered. Richard lunged forward, snatching the document. His face turned pale as he read. "This has to be fake." "It isn't," another voice said. Harold Whitman stepped into the study. The family turned in shock as Margaret's longtime attorney entered, carrying additional legal files. "I personally oversaw the transfer of ownership," Harold said firmly. "Margaret Carter legally deeded the estate to Evelyn 2 years ago." Daniel's face reddened. "She had no right." Harold's expression hardened. "She had every legal right." Sophia stared at Evelyn as if seeing her for the first time. "You knew?" Evelyn looked at her evenly. "I found out last night." Patricia's voice suddenly softened, dripping with false warmth. "Oh, sweetheart, surely there's been some misunderstanding. We're family." Evelyn laughed quietly. The sound sent chills through the room. Family, she looked around at each of them. The same family who excluded me from Christmas. The same family who mocked me while plotting to sell the home Grandma trusted me to protect. No one answered. Richard slammed his fist onto the desk. This is ridiculous. That house belongs to all of us. Evelyn's gaze sharpened. No, it belongs to the one person who stayed when Grandma was dying. The one person who cared for her while the rest of you disappeared. The accusation struck hard. Sophia's eyes dropped. Daniel clenched his jaw. Patricia looked away. The buyer shifted uncomfortably. The realtor closed his folder. I'm afraid this transaction cannot proceed. Richard turned furious. You can't cancel this. Yes, the realtor replied coolly. I can. As the buyer and realtor quietly gathered their things and left, panic began to spread across the Carter family's faces. Their fortune was slipping away, and Evelyn wasn't finished. She reached into the folder and pulled out another document. This is a formal notice to vacate. Patricia's mouth fell open. What? Evelyn's voice remained perfectly calm. You all have until New Year's Day to leave the property. The silence that followed was absolute. Then chaos erupted. You can't do this, Sophia shrieked. This is our home, Daniel shouted. Richard's face twisted with rage. You ungrateful little traitor. Evelyn stood tall, untouched by their outrage. For the first time in her life, their anger had no power over her. She looked directly at the family who had spent years diminishing her. You forgot whose name was on the deed. Then she turned and walked toward the door. As she stepped into the falling snow, the furious shouting behind her faded into the cold Christmas air. For the first time, Evelyn smiled. Because this Christmas, she had finally given herself the gift they never could. Justice. The days after Christmas were filled with desperate phone calls, angry messages, and dramatic pleas. Evelyn ignored most of them. Her family had spent years expecting her to fold under pressure, to apologize even when she had done nothing wrong, to surrender pieces of herself just to keep their approval. This time was different. On December 26th, Patricia arrived at Evelyn's apartment unannounced, wrapped in a designer coat and wearing the wounded expression she reserved for moments when manipulation served her best. When Evelyn opened the door, her mother immediately burst into tears. How could you do this to us? Patricia sobbed, pressing a trembling hand to her chest. We're your family. Evelyn leaned calmly against the doorway. No, Mom, she said softly. Family doesn't betray each other. Patricia's tears vanished almost instantly. Her expression hardened. This is because you've always been jealous of your siblings. Evelyn almost laughed. For years, that accusation would have crushed her. Now it sounded pathetic. I'm not jealous, she replied. I'm done being used. Patricia glared at her. You'll regret humiliating us. Evelyn met her gaze without fear. I already regret wasting years trying to earn love that was never real. Without another word, she closed the door. By New Year's Day, every member of the Carter family had vacated the estate. Daniel left furious and bitter. Sophia cried over the lifestyle she believed had been stolen from her. Richard stormed out, threatening lawsuits Harold quickly shut down. Patricia left last, pausing dramatically on the front steps, as if expecting Evelyn to beg her to stay. Evelyn simply locked the door behind her, and just like that, the house fell silent. For the first time in decades, the Carter estate felt peaceful. Over the following weeks, Evelyn walked through every room, rediscovering the home her grandmother had loved. The library still smelled faintly of old leather and cedar. The grand staircase creaked in familiar places. The fireplace in the sitting room glowed warmly each evening as snow drifted outside. Every corner held memories. Not all of them painful. One evening, Evelyn sat in her grandmother's favorite chair, rereading the letters Margaret had left behind. In one, her grandmother had written, "A home should shelter love, not greed. If this house ever becomes yours alone, fill it with people who truly need warmth." Those words stayed with Evelyn, and slowly an idea began to form. 3 months later, the Carter estate reopened not as a private family mansion, but as Margaret's haven, a shelter for children in need. The grand dining room became a cheerful communal space. The upstairs bedrooms were transformed into safe, welcoming rooms for children who had nowhere else to go. The empty halls filled with laughter, footsteps, and life. The local community embraced the project immediately. Newspapers praised Evelyn's generosity. Volunteers offered their time. Donations poured in. For the first time, the Carter name was associated not with wealth or status, but compassion. The public attention was impossible for her family to ignore. Sophia fumed whenever she saw social media posts celebrating Evelyn. Daniel complained bitterly to anyone who would listen. Patricia tried repeatedly to contact Evelyn, suddenly eager to rebuild their relationship. Evelyn never responded. She had learned that some doors were meant to stay closed. The following Christmas Eve, Margaret's haven glowed with light. A massive tree stood in the grand foyer, decorated by dozens of excited children. The scent of gingerbread and hot cocoa drifted through the house. Christmas carols echoed from the music room. Evelyn stood in the kitchen, helping frost cookies with a group of laughing children, her heart fuller than she could ever remember. Miss Evelyn, a little girl named Clara, called, tugging her sleeve, "Come see, we put the star on the tree." Evelyn followed her into the foyer. The children gathered around the sparkling tree, their faces glowing with joy. As she looked at them, something inside her settled. For years, she had chased acceptance from people incapable of giving it. Now she understood. Love was not something to beg for. It was something freely given and gratefully received. Later that evening, after the children had gone to bed, Evelyn stood alone by the fireplace. In her hands was a framed photograph of her grandmother. Margaret smiled back at her, kind, dyed and wise. Snow drifted softly outside the windows, just as it had the night Evelyn opened the cedar box. A tear slipped down her cheek. But it was not a tear of sadness, it was gratitude. "Thank you, Grandma," she whispered, "for believing in me before I believed in myself." The fire crackled softly, and for a moment Evelyn could almost feel Margaret's presence beside her. Warm, steady, proud. Evelyn looked around the home now filled with laughter, hope, and belonging. Her family had excluded her from Christmas to steal what they thought was theirs. Instead, they had unknowingly given her the greatest gift of all, freedom, and as the church bells rang midnight, Evelyn smiled. This was what Christmas was always meant to be. Not greed, not betrayal, but love, and at last she was finally home.